And then I took the bus, and in bus I arrived to University of Wisconsin Madison camp. This was the whole journey from. Now, the point was that once after arriving in Wisconsin, I had no money. I only had the $20. There was nobody who could. I didn't know anyone. You will not believe, Jyotima, for 8 days I survived on potato chips and peanuts because there was no money to buy bread. I don't know how, I still have no idea how the Shakuntala got this news that this is what has happened. He has arrived, he doesn't have money and he's not eating. She just called me on phone and she blasted me. Why don't you call me? Why didn't you call me? I could have given you money. This is the way to live here in America, like being hungry and so on and so forth. So I said, well, this is the way. So she sent some money and then I was able to get some help. That's how the first term, as I was studying in University of Wisconsin, again, existentially, I got an invitation from the University of California at Berkeley campus to teach a course on India. Now, let me give you a little background. At that time, there was so much interest in India in the young people because what was happening is that there was this Vietnam War was going on. And lots of young people were asked to go and fight, and they were not willing to go and fight. That was one part. Second thing is that Mahesh Yogi had started introducing yoga and so on and so forth. Then Hare Krishna movement also had started. So people were getting more and more interested about India. India was coming closer and closer to their attention. So the University of California wanted to have a course on India so that the students can know what India is and what to know about India. So they gave a course named The Cultural and Literary Traditions of India. That was the name of the course. And I was asked to teach that course. I still don't know who gave me my name and how they contacted me. Anyway, so I ended up teaching 4 years that course. It became very popular. To tell you the fact that students used to stand in the lobby to just listen to my lectures, or there were 70, 80 students in the class because the young people are very much interested. Anyway, at that moment when I was in Berkeley, within those 4 years, at one time in the evening there was a small party I was attending, and in that party I came across to meet a gentleman who had come from Alberta, Canada, Dr. Prasad, was his name. So we were just chit-chatting. So he asked me, what I'm doing. So I said, well, I'm going to be just here for some time to just make money and then go back to Wisconsin, do my PhD and go back to India. Because that was the idea. My coming to Berkeley was simply to make some money. I had no money. So he said, well, you'll go back to India, you'll become a professor of literature. So how will India benefit from that? I said, I have never thought about it. He said, but you should have something so that India can also benefit from your study. What should I do? He said, you should do something in education. Because in education in India, our education system is very old and it has not been revised, it has not been checked again. We need a very new understanding of what education is all about. So if you can do something in education, that will be wonderful. Now somehow, Jyotima, that clicked in my mind. That makes a lot of sense. So what to do? So I went to the education department school in Berkeley and I said, we cannot admit you. I said, why not? I said, you already have a PhD. I said, I know I have PhD, but this is not from this country, this subject or this university. It doesn't matter. On paper, you have PhD. We cannot give admission for second PhD. I said, all right, what to do? Anyway, making a very short story, I came to Chicago. And while I was in Chicago, I learned that there's a University of Michigan nearby, not too far. And in University of Michigan, one of my friends who used to study with me in Baroda, he was doing PhD in economics. So he came to know. So he said, hey, come here. We have not met for many years. Why don't we come and have some time? I said, all right. So I drove from Chicago and came to, there's a beautiful campus, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. It's called Ann Arbor, the name of the city. So I went to the School of Education and I talked to the professor and he looked at the whole thing. He said, if you can pass this GRE exam that we have, then we'll willing to admit you. I said, okay. So I passed the exam and I was admitted to do PhD in education. That is how my studies started at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in 1971 around September. While studying at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, I came across Osho's audio discourses in Hindi called Mahavir Meri Drishti Mein, Mahavir in my view. Until then, before that, I had read Osho's books before in Hindi, just here and there. I had not heard his audio lectures as much, but I had read his books, and that much familiarity I had about him, but didn't know anything about him, nothing. So while listening to that discourse, Jyotirmay, I was so overwhelmed, I was so overtaken that I had nothing but a tremendous urge that I must go and see. And that time he was known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. So I just had the idea that I must go and see Bhagwan anyway, any cost. I was so pulled. But again, the same thing was, again, I had to finish my PhD, then no money to go to India. It was not that easy. Anyway, so I first of all finished my PhD in 1973. And then in 74, again, existentially, I got an opportunity to be a director of research at the college in Chicago. And in that 1974, I started making some money. And after 74 finished, I then left for India in 1975. And on 10th of January, I left Bombay to arrive to Pune. So first I arrived in Bombay from Chicago. I flew Swiss Airline. So I came to Bombay, and I was coming to Pune in a train. So in front of me, there was one Parsi gentleman. So he inquired where I am going, and so I said, I'm going to Sri Rajneesh Ashram, Pune. Rajneesh Ashram? No. You should not go to Rajneesh Ashram. At that time, there was so much negative ideas about. I said, I'm here to go to him, and I'm going to go. He said, you know what? This is what people say, that when you sit in front of Bhagwan, Sri Rajneesh, he hypnotizes you. So I said, whatever will happen. He said, no. Do one thing. When you sit in front of him, you keep a pin in your hand. Just pinch yourself, and the hypnotism will not work. I said, thank you. He had such feeling compassion for me. He said, here is my card. If anything goes wrong, just come straight away to my house. I said, thank you very much. Anyway, so I went to the hotel near the station, and I had a correspondence with Ma Yogalakshmi. She was the secretary, Osho's secretary. So she knew that I'll be there. So I arrived at the, and Osho had just arrived from Bombay to Pune in 74. And this I'm talking about 75. So I entered in her office, and so I said, Ma, is there any way that I'll have a darshan of Osho today? Oh, we don't know. I don't know whether it can happen. I said, what do you mean I don't know whether it can happen? I've come all the way from Chicago for his darshan. No, well, we will see. We'll see how it goes. You do one thing. Tomorrow morning, there is a dynamic meditation at 6 o'clock. You do dynamic meditation. And then there is a talk by Osho, and you just be there. You can imagine, I felt so disheartened. I said, I've come all the way with hope that as soon as I go, I will have a darshan. And there seems to be so difficult. It doesn't matter. But it was a January month, very cold. I could not make it for the dynamic meditation at 6 o'clock because I had to stay somewhere out away from the ashram. But I did come to his discourse. And he was giving a talk on Kabir. Gungi Keri Sarkara, it was the name of the title. And it was a very small place. There were about 35 people just seated around. Osho arrived and he started speaking. As he started speaking, I simply started crying. I was just crying and crying and crying For 1.5 hours he was speaking and I was simply seated there just crying. And I couldn't understand why I'm crying, what has made me cry. Nobody had done it, nothing else. But just by listening to him or being whatever it may be, but I was not able to hold myself. And he got up, he left, and so on and so forth. And then I was just wandering around here and there and suddenly said, "Come, Ma Lakshmi is calling you in her office." I said, "Okay." So I went to her office and she said, "So today you are going to see Bhagwan." Oh, and I just jumped because I had no idea that this is going to happen. She says, "You're going to see Bhagwan today. So make sure that you reach at the Lao Tzu gate by this time and somebody will usher you inside." That is how my journey on this 11th of January